Okay, bang on 2 o'clock. Welcome to our Usher Institute guest speaker webinar. And today we have Sarah Morton with us, who's a fellow social scientist and who left the university in 2017 to start her own company. So Sarah has written a blog called Leave and Startup, Are You Crazy? And the talk will be based on this blog. And it will focus on the story of why she decided to set up a company and how her work still relates to research and what her journey was from the university to being a company director. So the format will be, as usual, about 40 minutes talk from Sarah and then 15 to 20 minutes questions. And please post any questions via the Q&A panel, and we will use the Q&A panel to then direct the questions to Sarah afterwards. It's recorded and streamed via YouTube. And that's it. Sarah, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Let me just get my screen sharing on. So thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this webinar. It's nice to see quite a lot of familiar names who are there in the participants list today. So it's lovely to reconnect with the university. And can you see my screen? Is that working? Kathrin, can you see my screen?
We can see a screen. It looks like the
wrong screen.
Calendar invite.
Yeah, sorry. There we go. Try again. Oh, we've had
yes, that's perfect.
Is that it now? Okay.
Great. If you just go to presentation mode, I think
sure.
then
Sure,
perfect.
I will, yeah.
Thanks.
There we go. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I titled that blog, Leave and Startup, Are You Crazy? Because when I was leaving the university, I had like 3 months between deciding to go and actually leaving. And it was quite a common reaction for people to go and kind of be quite amazed that I was actually going to leave the university and go off and do something on my own. So as Kathrin said, I wrote a blog about it, but actually in today's presentation, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the journey of kind of taking the plunge of leaving the university and setting up a company. I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunity that presented itself and why we did it, a little bit about what we did and what it is we are doing, and then some reflections on what is it like to actually do this and you know, move from being in the university to being in the private sector. So just a little bit of a starting point. I know a lot of you know me, but just for those of you who don't, I've been working around kind of knowledge to action, research mobilization, formally since 2001 in the at the university until 2017. But before that, more informally in the third sector and the public sector, doing kind of policy influencing work. And so through all of those different posts, I've been involved in kind of policy influencing, practice influencing, co-production, and traditional sort of research dissemination. And I took what I call my midlife PhD starting in 2008, because I was doing all this work at the Centre for Research on Families and Relationships, mainly about getting people engaged with research in different kind of ways. But I became quite interested in, well, is this actually making a difference? What is it about research that's making a difference? And what is it about these kind of knowledge exchange activities? So my PhD looked at what is research impact and how can it be assessed. And I was doing that from 2008 to 12, just as the whole REF agenda was really kicking off, and lots of other people were interested in, okay, well, what is research impact and how do universities really make a difference? Because I looked at that topic in my PhD and developed a kind of framework for thinking about impact, I then ended up carrying out 7 independent impact studies of different initiatives in various parts of the world. And so, you know, I've really got to kind of know quite a lot about the topic of impact. And what I've always tried to do in my career, and certainly what I'm doing in the business, is kind of holding theory and practice quite close together, because I've always been a practitioner. My background's in community education, and you'll see from these pictures here that this is working with people on the left there. That's with some women's organizations from around Europe, and you'll see Kate Tisdall there from the university, because the university is involved in that one. And on the right there, working in the Philippines with a city authority around how they're going to understand whether they make a difference to ending violence against children. So, you know, trying to bring together really robust thinking with actually doing it is always what I've tried to do. And our company Matter of Focus does that through a mixture of, we have a tech product and we work directly with people as consultants. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. So I suppose the idea really germinated as I was working at the university, because on the whole, the university is quite keen to push their research out into the world. And although at the Centre for Research on Families and Relationships and lots of other work I did, that included collaboration and maybe sitting with policymakers and maybe co-production, so maybe working together to build research projects. It was still quite a push model. It was still, we're the researchers, we're the experts in the institution, and we think that research kind of knowledge is the most important kind of knowledge. And I suppose over the years of working in that way, I got much more interested in, well, what do organizations need to be able to do research well? And I suppose I ended up sitting much more alongside organizations to help them use evidence effectively, to understand what they do, to learn and to track their impact. And, you know, it became really clear, and other people have written about this, of course, is that actually what they need is not research, but they need a whole suite of data, evidence and feedback that they can pull together to understand change. And in my PhD, I published the research contribution framework on the left there, which was really looking at how does research have an impact. But it became really obvious as I developed that work, and it's based on contribution analysis, that it had a wider application, that actually a process of really setting out, well, how do you think you're going to have an impact? How do you think you're going to contribute to change? And then looking at how you're going to evidence it could be applied in lots of other places. And as I worked more with this framework, with researchers and with organizations in the third sector, mainly sort of family and relationship type organizations, I was thinking, oh, this is really good. People really like this, but there must be a better way to really bring this to life for people. And a couple of other things kind of happened that made me decide that it was time to leave and start up a company. One was that the only place I could really see my career going within the university as someone working in knowledge exchange, so not really a traditional academic and not really a kind of, not really an administrator, but somewhere in between, was kind of getting sucked more into the bureaucracy. And it was honestly something that I didn't want to do. And I really wanted to stay at that edge of working with people to make a difference. So we set up Matter of Focus. I can tell you a little bit more about how it came about, but basically Matter of Focus is a mission-led organization. We help organizations, and they're mainly in the public sector, some in the third sector, use evidence to improve outcomes for the people and communities that they care about. And that's helping them understand and work meaningfully with outcomes and ideas about impact, supporting them to use data and evidence effectively, and bringing some tools and techniques they can use to really track their change in the world. And we've been really lucky as we've set up the company and built a software tool that we've worked with some amazing organizations here in Scotland and other parts of the world, a lot of really innovative organizations really interested in making this real. And we've built a software tool called OutNav, which is like SatNav, but for outcomes. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that later, but that's been a big part of what we've been doing as we set up Matter of Focus. So the opportunity that kind of presented itself for us to start a company, it's not really an accident that this has happened in Scotland, because lots of organisations are grappling with how they demonstrate their contribution to change. And in Scotland, you know, we're a world leader in outcome-based public service thinking. And this is coming up for 11 years ago that the Scottish Government launched the National Performance Framework, and they started commissioning everything, local authority services, third sector services, on outcomes, and every government department has to talk about outcomes and is aligned to this outcome framework, which was refreshed last year on the 10th anniversary into the petal diagram you can see there. And also we've got sustainable development goals. So, you know, lots of companies, organizations around the world are aligning their work to these different goals and trying to think about what it is that they do that helps to reach these. And what I found in my work is that people really liked the framework that I developed, and they really enjoy getting to grips with it. But it was quite difficult for them to really operationalize it. And so I thought, oh, it'd be really good if we could digitize this and we could think about ways of helping people really embed this in their work. And I met Ailsa Cook, who's also formerly at the university, who was an outcome expert. And she was particularly working with organizations who really cared about outcomes and wanted to have them central to the way they did their work. And so between us, she'd actually already left the university. She'd set up a company called Outcome Focus. And so we decided that we would join together and set up our company. It was called Outcome Focus to start with, and changed to Matter of Focus the following year. So what did we do? We exploring the options. Should we be a charity? Should we be a company? Should we be a social enterprise? Should we be a spin out? Interestingly, we couldn't fit the university spin out model because Ailsa had already left the university, so it didn't allow for you to have a kind of equal partnership with someone who wasn't currently an employee. In the end, we decided a limited company was the best option. We can talk more about this in the Q&A if you're interested in it, but it gave us the most control over what we wanted to do, and that would include, you know, whether we wanted to offer discounts to different kinds of organizations and various other things. It gave us the most flexibility. So we shifted the existing consultancy into the company. We got an office. We were in a place called Codebase, which is a tech incubator. We were most of the women in the first, we were in a big shared office space. I think we were 80% of the women in that shared space. And we got our first employee. Actually, I poached somebody from working at CRFR and she came with us. And we started building a software product and working alongside some of our clients who were interested in this work to kind of trial stuff and improve as we went. So it was interesting actually, because it was a much better time to be a mission-led business than I'd realized when we started off. So it became very clear to us early on that we weren't a traditional business, that actually we cared not just about whether we made money or not, but we also cared about other things. And we became a certified B Corporation in 2019, which means that we have a triple bottom line, which is profit. Of course, you have to make a profit to be sustainable, people and planet. So every 3 years we get certified. Patagonia are the kind of most well-known B Corporation. But some other exciting things were happening at the same time. So there was a whole network, international network of companies called Zebras, who are trying to come up with an alternative model to the unicorn model, which is things like Facebook, that you kind of discover a widget and then it's going to become this multi-billion-pound enterprise. So the Zebras Unite is all about purpose-driven business, building things that are good for people, not bad for people, and trying to create an alternative dialogue to that whole unicorn one. And then there's a whole initiative around Scotland Can Be, which supports the kind of B Corporation, and quite a lot of work, you know. Social enterprises in Scotland are doing pretty well, and people are really talking about, well, how do we make a difference? So without realizing it, we'd landed at a point where, you know, it was quite an exciting time to be a mission-led business. And I don't know if any of you have followed this over the COVID period, but there's been quite a lot of publicity and discussion in social media and traditional media that mission-led companies are doing better in these difficult times than traditional companies. And so then some people have been really important in the journey so far. So people are definitely at the heart of what we do. And the more I read about successful businesses, I realize that, you know, people matter so much more than things. We are really lucky. Steve on the left there agreed to do what we call a minimum viable product, a kind of basic product in return for shares in the company. So he's prepared to put in a bit of work pro bono to get us to that basic point. He's now full time with us as our software developer. As I said earlier, we had a communication specialist that we brought with us. We developed a relationship with a design company. We got an intern early on through the Santander intern scheme at the university, and she stayed with us for 2.5 years. She just moved on recently. And there's also quite a lot of support out there from things like the Business Gateway and Scottish Enterprise. So we were lucky because we had a Business Gateway advisor, which is kind of come through Edinburgh Council, who just completely believed in us and supported us and said yes, and really encouraged us to do everything, which worked really well. And then through Scottish Enterprise, we've had some different kinds of business advice, people scrutinising our business plans, advising us on marketing, on PR, on building a workplace culture, on lots of things that kind of help you get going as a business. And then, of course, the other people that have been really important have been clients and also wider stakeholders who are interested in what we're doing and willing to kind of come on the journey with us and really help us make this work. So basically the journey so far, we've grown from 3 people, we're now 10 people. We're what's called a bootstrapped company, which is not a very nice term, kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But basically, we've grown by 60% revenue per year since we started. So we've got 70 organizations and 500 users on our software product, and they're across quite a lot in Scotland, but other parts of the UK and some international ones, mainly English-speaking world, because of course our software product is in English, and so at the moment that's who it's accessible to. And in particular, their research impact organization, there's quite a lot of organizations that we call new models of care. So people interested in turning care services to be more person-centered and more outcome-focused. Quite a lot of children's services, particularly those ones who are commissioned on outcomes or have multiple outcomes from multiple funders, and some pioneering third sector organizations who really want to put outcomes at the heart of what they do. And I suppose the problems that we're solving for people are the one I mentioned earlier. You know, organizations are commissioned on outcomes, or they need to demonstrate impact, and their work is the sort of work that's not easily counted or simply measured. So our approach really works for people who are working with people, whether that's educating, inspiring, influencing, empowering, all those kind of things that are much more hard to count or measure. Most of our organizations who they need to understand if they're making a difference and how they're doing that. So they don't just want to know what works, but they want to know, can these things work? Are they working? How are they working? So they're really interested in getting to grips with those change processes and learning from them so that they can deliver a really good service to the people that they want to. And also they need to pull together disparate kinds of data, evidence, feedback, and research to understand what they're doing. So that might be routinely collected data. It might be feedback, formal feedback, informal feedback. It might be that there's research that backs up different parts of what they do, but it's really a job to bring those together. And this is one of the things that really, for a lot of our clients, the penny really drops, because we are using an approach based on contribution analysis. So really separating out ideas of attribution and contribution, because a lot of the people we work with, especially in the health service, that an attribution model is being kind of pushed onto them for things that don't actually fit it. So attribution models work where there's direct relationships between what you do and the outcome, and in closed systems. But on the whole, all of the people we work with who are working with people-based change, we're talking about a complex system where what you do interacts with multiple other factors to influence change. So it's not that direct cause and effect. So you can see things like delayed discharge. You know, the attribution model is applied to delayed discharge, and simple counting is used, where actually what's going on is a really complex system. It's quite different from one place to the other. It involves care services and social work services and families and communities, but it's being pushed into a model that really doesn't work for it. So what we do with people is we take them through a process. Usually it's a mixture of consultancy supported by software. So we map the context and how activities influence outcomes. We audit their data and evidence and help them develop an evidence plan. We help them to track progress using our software tool. And we have a whole kind of series of ongoing discussion, reflection. We have webinars, we have community meetings, and they have different ways of reporting straight from the software that we've built. And we use this very simple looking theory of change approach, which we spent a long time really refining these headings so that they're very, very simple. What's important about this is it's very process driven, so that even though you can use this quite simply, you can layer this up to create quite complex understandings, and it really scrutinizes engagement. So this section here about who with and how they feel, which is reactions. You know, if it's people-based work, how people react to the work, that they think, oh yes, this is for me, I can do this, this can help me, this, I like you, I trust you, all of those things we know, whether it's research impact, whether it's health services, whether it's trying to, you know, deliver learning to nurses or whoever, whatever it is, if this isn't right, then people don't learn things, people don't do things differently, and it can't make a difference. So our model is very much built on, you know, focusing down on this people-based process. And you can do this in quite a simple way. This is just a kind of desk version with some headings and some post-its. I actually did this with a friend of mine who was running a It's like a nature school, a forest school for children during the holidays. And these outcomes here at the top were the outcomes that he was funded to work to by the funder. But we spent a little bit of time working this out, and this became the framework through which he collected data and evidence for his work. And you can do it in a much more complex way. So this is us working with the Thistle Foundation, who are, some of you may know, Edinburgh-based outcome organization, very pioneering, and we spent several days with them with this big sticky wall in the background, helping them map out all their different work streams to the outcomes that mattered to them so that they could really get a handle on it. And of course, what we've done since COVID is we've taken it online. So we now do outcome mapping on a virtual whiteboard called Miro, which I really recommend if you're interested in tools, and alongside Zoom. So we can have that interaction with people in that way. And so doing this outcome mapping work and using that framework to set out how people think they're going to make a difference becomes a kind of framework for evaluation. So it forms a framework where you can really evaluate outcomes meaningfully rather than just in a crass way of kind of counting those high level outcomes. It helps people to track the change that they're involved in and adapt and learn. So get instant feedback and use those feedback loops really to drive what they want to do and make sure it is going towards the outcomes that matter to them. It can be used to report on changes retrospectively. So when I've used it, particularly when I was saying about the impact studies on the whole, that's been going back and trying to look at, well, did something have an impact? So it can be used in that way. It can tell the story of how change happened and help focus on what levels of change are most appropriate to monitor, because something's obviously beyond your control. And it really helps to set out this logic so you can really demonstrate where the key contribution of any initiative is. And the second part of what we do with people is help them think about evidence and data. And I like to talk about a patchwork quilt of evidence and data, because for each client that quilt looks quite different. So it's not going to be the same. And these are just some suggestions that kind of thrown there, if you like. And it will always be bespoke to any particular outcome area. And then basically we're working with people to use our software to track progress. So the software holds these, what we call outcome maps, in the way that I'm showing you there. So you can actually just put it in there and have these columns, and then you can click through on each of these and track your progress. So you can do some analysis, some qualitative data analysis. We can talk a little bit more about that if you want after this, but it allows people really to spend some time thinking, well, how are we making a difference here? What data and evidence do we have that's going to really show that we're making a difference? And then what you can see on this slide here is color coding. So basically in our software, and this is one of the innovations we're kind of proudest of, because you rate each of these stepping stones in 2 dimensions. The first one is how good your progress is. So the traffic light colors that you're seeing there, the greens and yellow, are progress. So if progress is good, then you get a green. And then the second color is a strength of color, which is to do with how confident you are in your evidence. And we apply fairly traditional evidence standards, or we ask people to develop their own standards. And so you'll see these pale yellow ones here is where evidence is weaker. And this dark green is where evidence is stronger. So if you have a whole series of these for different areas, you can instantly at a glance get a sense of how things are going, and you can click through on these to actually see, do some analysis or see the analysis that sits underneath them. So the benefits of this approach is it's giving people a way of evidencing and telling the story of the difference that they made. So it's giving a framework for doing that, and it's giving some tools and techniques. And I suppose what's really important about our approach in terms of the kind of tools and techniques is we really believe people need to have things that they can try and start to embed what's quite a complex set of sort of self-evaluation, learning, reflection into their organization. And because everyone's drowning in data, because they have data sitting all around their organization, it's giving them a way of organizing it and thinking about how they can use it and where they can use it. And so it's a really it brings all of that to life. I think it's really important, people are actually setting out the change they want to see. And for those of you involved in research, you want to see research impact. Of course, it works really well for that. So you say, okay, well, we're trying to have an impact on this sort of policy or practice area. Let's really set out how we want to see that happening. And then you're also understanding how change happens, because you're being really clear about, well, what is the change mechanism? I suppose what it does, setting out outcome maps in this way, is really drill into, okay, well, we think if we do these sorts of things, we're going to have this sort of influence, and we're going to check out if that's actually the influence we are having. What a lot of our clients say to us is it helps them pay attention to what's important. So it's really helping them to focus on the things that really matter to them as organizations. And a lot of organizations have a sort of unique way of doing things that they feel is their approach or their kind of standard, or something for them, which is really unique. And they want to be able to articulate that and sort of open the black box on it and set it out. And actually, by setting it out in that way, particularly if they're service providers, they're able to share that with the people who use their service. A lot of clients comment on the fact that it puts relationships really in the center. So having that relationship focus here in this how they feel column, and really focusing on who you're engaging, what helps positive engagement, how do you want them to react, what's going to make them react and engage positively, is so important, because all of the work that we know goes on with building relationships, and in knowledge exchange, or the work I used to do at the Centre for Research on Families and Relationships, a lot of it was about building those relationships with policy people, with key organisations, with practitioners, that researchers would have a high level of trust. And a lot of that work's kind of invisible, and so people really like the way that this approach really sets out how relationships are core to what goes on. And then, of course, there's a whole learning and sharing that's possible once we start to do this. And one of the things we're just getting interested in as we launched our sort of proper full version of the software in summer 2019, having built it up to that point. But obviously clients were using it as we built it. But suddenly you can actually see in some particular areas how people are doing things. So research impact's one of those. So what are the key ways people are influencing policy? What are the key ways people are influencing practice? Or we've been doing a lot of work around participation. So what are the key models of participation that people are using? And could you look at how someone else has done that, if it's really set out well, and then use that as a way of thinking about your work? And we have had quite a few comments from clients, particularly more recently, about how using this approach has helped them get funding for what they do, because suddenly they're able to be really clear to funders about something that maybe wasn't that obvious. So a good example of that is the Edinburgh Community Health Forum, which is a membership organisation for all the community health organisations in Edinburgh. So they bring people together to learn together and network and lobby together. And they set out what it is about the forum that makes a difference to community health using this approach, and they thought that was really important for them getting funded in that round. I don't know if you remember the round in Edinburgh a couple of years ago, where a lot of people got quite big cuts. So I want to just finish off by doing some a little bit, move away from what we're doing as a company, and talk a little bit more about what it's like to leave and start up. And it's interesting because there's actually a lot more similarities than I thought there would be. So running a small company is quite a lot like running a research centre. And certainly, I was involved in running a research centre that had to keep generating money, that had to employ people, that had to have business plans, that had to have strategic plans, that had to think of ways of making sure people were getting what they needed and doing the work that they could. And actually the skill set is really, really pretty similar, I think. And much less different than I imagined. And quite a lot of times when we've had some of this Scottish Enterprise support and other support that's checked out our thinking, we've always been pretty on the ball in terms of where we are with our business thinking, which, considering none of us have run a business before, is quite interesting, I think. So for those of you who think you might want to do this, and you've got some of those, you've been running a research centre, you've been having to generate income for your research and employ people, all the rest of it, those are the skills that you need anyway. I think in terms of it being different, it's much more flexible. it's much more adaptable. It's much more fast paced, and especially, you know, we've been in startup mode. We started in summer of 2017, so, you know, we're just 3.5 years old. So I've been there for 3 years, but, you know, that very fast paced early stage where we're developing a product, we were going out and working with clients, we were checking out our understandings, we were coming back and kind of building again and trying something differently. You know, we'd employ a couple of people for a project, and then we wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't be with us anymore. There would be a bit of coming and going and trying, you know, to think about what skills we needed and what people we needed. So it's been a pretty fast journey. And actually, we've recently recruited 2 people. One's a finance and operations person from the third sector, and someone else who's been working in the third sector. And they both say they're really shocked about the pace, because it feels so much faster than the pace at in their previous jobs. But having said that, I do feel it's kind of slowing down, because you know, we're getting to that point in time really where things are beginning to you know, settle down, and any change we make has bigger implications as we become a slightly bigger company. There's loads of space for innovation and doing things differently. So when I was at university, I was always a little bit of a square peg in a round hole, because I wasn't really an academic and I wasn't really an administrator. I was somewhere in between those 2 things. And quite often you just get your hand slapped for trying to do things differently. If you try and get funding for doing things differently, go, and you don't quite fit. And if you try and, you know, suggest to a group of people that they might work differently, you know, they don't really want to do it. So I felt in the university I was quite often just not fitting that well. Whereas in the business sector, especially in the tech sector, people are really excited when you do something different. They want people to do different things. They really encourage people to do different things. There's a real, much more of a risk-taking environment, and a sense that you can just grab things and try them. If they don't work out, it doesn't really matter. And so that's been really exciting and a lot more fun. There's a lot less bureaucracy, as you might imagine. We're a tiny company. We can hire and fire as we want. We can move offices. We can make a new website. We can do lots of things, you know, very, very quickly, because we've got much more control. And it's so much smaller. Although I did experience some of that at Centre for Research of Families and Relationships, because we sat between 2 schools, so we managed to dodge a bit of the bureaucracy. But obviously there is less bureaucracy. Obviously there's a little bit less security, but actually maybe not as much as you think. I mean, for the first, I think 8 or 9 years that I worked at the university, I was on some sort of rolling contract. You know, I'm sure you all know people who have those jobs that are very much tied to the latest funding stream, and they aren't permanent full-time jobs. And even when my job got made into a permanent job, which I think was mainly because the regulations meant you couldn't be constantly on those contracts, it was only really as good as the money that came in against it. So although there was some security, I wouldn't say there was really a massive amount less security, really, less than you might think. And what's really good about the, you know, working in this way for me is that I really know I'm making a difference all the time. So I'm not stuck in a little hamster wheel. And just got this message a couple of days ago from somebody at Health Technology Wales who said they just received news of a substantial funding uplift, and the impact work has helped in demonstrating our contributions and giving confidence to further invest in Health Technology Wales. So, you know, that's a really nice thing to hear. And we've heard that from a few other people as well. So, you know, I think it definitely feels like you're much more, you know, in the real world, really working in the real world. And certainly for me, that's a place I feel much happier. And then in terms of what I have learned and gained, oh, I'm trying to get my slide to move. Frozen. There we go. Building a company, if you've got a lot of work experience, it's not that hard. It was really funny when Ailsa and I first showed up, particularly in Codebase, which was the tech place. You know, we're 2 middle-aged women setting up a tech company, and we definitely did not fit that environment, which was quite male, quite techie people who didn't really talk much. We just felt that we were talking all the time, and they were all like sitting with their headphones on coding. But actually, because we had a lot of work experience between us, A lot of things we could already do. We knew how to hire people, a lot of them didn't. We knew how to work directly with clients. A lot of them had really good ideas, but they had no way of getting them to a market because they didn't have those relationships. We knew how to run a project. You know, a lot of those things meant that we could just hit the ground running and build a company based on all of those. So I'd say that side of it's been easier. Building a software product is really hard and complex. And what our software does is try to bring together a space for people to do quite a complex and nuanced bit of work, which is qualitatively analysing their progress towards outcomes. And I suppose we think our niche is definitely bringing together a structure through software with thinking, with people. So it's never going to replace the people and the thinking, and it's always going to have to be interpreted. And it's always a job of a bit of an art of how you describe things and how you analyze things and how you pull data together. So we're trying to build something, or we've built something that helps people do something that's very difficult. But you know, a software product is a yes or no machine, isn't it? It's a 1 or a 0. There is no nuance in there. So we're trying to build a structure for something quite nuanced within this very definitive environment. So that has been difficult. I feel like I'm really happy with where we've got to now. I think we've got something that's quite unique. And if you look at the competition, it's all very numbers driven and all very kind of crass outcome measurement driven. The third thing is, you know, I'm really passionate that work should be good. I'm sure a lot of you are in the work you are in because you care about what you do and you want to go to work every day and do something you feel is worthwhile. But if you look around out there in the world, there's so much awful work and people are treated so badly and, you know, really don't get what they deserve from work. So the whole thing about being a mission-led company, about treating people well, about building a place to work, that's a nice place to work, that is kind to people, that expects really high standards, but also tries to treat people really fairly, I'm very passionate about, and I think we really need to do more work on that. So it's very nice to be able to do that. And, you know, from what I've heard about the university sector over the last few years since I've left, I know things have got really, really tough for a lot of people and really, really hard-nosed. And so I'm very glad not to be in that environment, I must say. And then the whole thing about having a team, you know, it's wonderful to get people on board and get them to pick up your ideas and work with them. All of these new relationships with clients, like networking in the business sector, networking with the values-based companies, not just in this country, around the world, you know, in America and all over in Europe. It's just been really, really interesting and a new way of working for me. And if you would like to have more opportunities to hear about this stuff, I just want to do a little plug for some other things that are coming up soon. I'm giving a webinar on research impact later today, an hour after this, so you have to register quick if you want that. But we're also running a research impact school, which is looking at this approach for research impact. And we're also have a webinar coming up about outcome measurement. So that's my little plug, at which point I'm going to stop.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was inspiring. Many people said inspiring in the chat, which was absolutely great attribute to be here for a talk. So I have a ton of questions as well, but I'll just do a quick one just to kick off, and then I'll ask other ones that have been posted. So it sounds great, yeah. So scope for innovation, less bureaucracy, making a difference all the time. Why should we all stay at university?
Well, I mean, obviously we need people to work at universities, and it's definitely not for everyone. I mean, I suppose even the work I did at university, I liked pushing the edges. I liked being on the boundaries. So there's maybe quite a lot of it that really suits me. And I suppose, I focused. I mean, have I focused mainly on the positive? No, I think I've been quite honest about if I was answering the question, leave and start up, are you crazy? Well, this is my answer, right? So, I think, of course, universities matter. I mean, I am dismayed about what's happening to people in terms of like work-life balance and kind of embedded sexist cultures where it's very hard for women to succeed and also take care of their caring responsibilities. And just some of the real hard business edge that's crept into education. I'm kind of hoping the COVID crisis might give it a kick, but we'll have to wait and see, won't we? But, you know, universities do really matter. I would just like it if they were a bit nicer places to work, and actually we could get back to some more culture of learning and less of a culture of business, of profit making and churning people through. Yeah.
And I suppose there's scope for both as well. So you can do both.
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
Yeah. So a related question to what you mentioned about being stressed. Sarah is asking, has it made a difference to how many hours you work, or how you feel about the hours you work, and whether you feel tired, overburdened, or stressed?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the last bit of time that I spent at the university, I had to deal with quite a lot of extremely difficult things. And so I was very, very glad to get away from those. And actually, that's the same for my business partner, Ailsa. So we both had some quite bad experiences in the university before we left. But I think more generally, I suppose the thing about if you have your own company, it's yours, isn't it? And we took a decision, I think partly because we had both been badly burnt in previous jobs, that Matter of Focus was going to be a place that is a good place to work, that has good work-life balance. We actually put it in our contracts with our staff that you must maintain good work-life balance. And if you have a problem with that, please let us know, because we don't want anyone to be working till midnight, and we don't work till midnight. So we've been really successful without completely killing ourselves. And there's quite a strong culture in the whole entrepreneurial sector about these kind of entrepreneurs striving all hours to bring their vision to life, which is also quite macho and male. And if you get away from that kind of traditional male driven macho kind of culture around that, there's lots of other stuff going on. So some of the things I quoted, like the B corporations and the Zebras Unite, where people are trying to create some alternative stories around, well, what does it mean to start a business? It doesn't have to be, you know, this kind of massive strive to invent the next Facebook. Actually, it could be something that's good enough, that's doing something that's really good in the world. So yeah, I would definitely say I feel much better about getting up and going to work than I did then. And it's definitely been, I mean, it's not always easy. And, you know, we've had some real like cash flow crunches where a bit like, oh, how are we going to pay people? Or when we've not been able to pay ourselves, or, but we've managed to make it work. And we have not spent every weekend just flogging ourselves to death. I would say that doing it as a partnership is probably a massive part of that. I don't think I could have done it on my own, or I would have done it on my own, because I think then, well, I mean, I had a burst appendix, for example, last year, so I was out of action. So if I'd been doing it on my own, I don't know how I would have coped with things like that. And, you know, so if one of us is down, there's always the other one there. But not just that, there's someone else to kind of really bounce ideas around with and support each other's decisions and kind of get through those difficult times. So, yeah. And actually, interestingly, the research shows that multiple founder businesses are more successful than single founder businesses. So if you're thinking about doing it, find someone else to do it with if you can.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice, actually. And so there's another question here from Tamara. Have you encountered organizations that are supposed to use specific outcomes frameworks, but have come to you as they would like to change? And if so, how have you dealt with this?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a specific example. So I don't think we've had organizations that have had to use a whole framework, but we have quite a lot of people that are tied into a particular way of working with outcomes, or outcomes metrics particularly, and we always try and incorporate them in what we do. So if there's funders outcomes, for example, we always try and incorporate funders outcomes in an outcome map. It's really important to do that. I mean, we did have a few people. We had an organization that had done a lot of like logic modeling. So they had all these logic models for all their different areas of work, but they weren't using them at all. And what they wanted to do was like streamline those so that they could really make better use of them. So that would be, they'd kind of gone down one road, but they were quite open to redoing it in a different way. Some of the people who are working towards the sustainable development goals, or I've been working with, I don't know if you saw on the slide, that an organization called End Violence, which is a global partnership to end violence against children. And they have a slightly dominant, you know, quant paradigm. I think those are the hardest ones for us to work with, because if they really hold on to a quantitative paradigm and they really believe they can measure everything, then they're not really going to get what we're trying to do. So it's only once they realize that that sort of measurement doesn't really tell their story or doesn't really help them do the job that they're then sort of ready to work with us. So Tamara, I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that's, yeah, the best I can think of at the moment. But happy to talk about it more if you want to get in touch.
Great offer there. I suppose your clients are slightly unusual, I would say. I mean, they're, how do I phrase this? They're not the conventional hardcore commercial companies that some other people might encounter, or is that?
Well, we sell to the public and the third sector. Those are our clients, and that's very explicit. I mean, those are the people that have the problems we're solving. And we have had a little bit of a discussion with the like the social the impact investment community who have this problem, but then haven't quite got to a solution yet. And we do have some people like, we've got a health and social care partnership in Midlothian. I mean, that is quite a conventional organisation, even though it's in the public sector. So, I mean, there's lots of companies, there's a whole load of company language about whether you sell, to other companies or whether you sell to the public sector or whatever, but our clients are definitely public sector or third sector organisations whose work is about working with people to make change in whatever way that is. And it could be quite formally about, training or whatever, or it could be much more informally about empowering people, but also who have this outcome conundrum that they have to be able to talk about outcomes, or they have to be able to explain their impact. Like if you don't have to be able to do that, it's not worth going through this process. You just use your crash measures or just tell people what you did, and that's fine. For some settings, that's fine. So it's really, honing in on the part of the, of people who have these problems, which is that they need to talk to outcomes in a meaningful way, that they want to be able to really tell a full story of the difference that they make.
So another anonymous person has posted, it's actually a great question, so I don't know why you are anonymous, but so how would you get that first consultancy client that helps you to refine your tools? And how do you then build that tool and knowledge into a consultancy service? Chicken and egg.
Yeah, so well, the thing is that so Ailsa and I, between us, already had all these networks. So I'd already been working in the field, we knew the policy people, we knew the main organisations. I was already recognised as a kind of research impact leader, as a research assessment impact leader. I also had been working with outcomes. She'd done work for the Scottish Government with outcomes. She'd done work for all these other organisations. So we had the networks already. And people already interested in what we were doing. So, we completely hit the ground running. So if you don't have that, then that's where you need to start. You need to get out there and network. And the thing is, you've got to be solving a problem. You can't just have a nice idea. You've got to be solving a problem. So you've got to find those people that have the problem and just get talking to people. It's the same with research impact. Just get out there and start talking to people. It's so easy to get stuck in a sector. And I think actually it's interesting because I think academia is one of the worst for it. In most other sectors, in the public sector or the third sector or the business sector, it's normal to be networking with people who aren't in your sector, who are quite different from you. And there's such a richness to be had by doing that anyway, and help you understand lots of other things. But I think you just have to try and participate in those networks where the people have the similar problems to you. And if you really don't know where to start, I would say there is advice within universities, or certainly within Edinburgh. There's some knowledge mobilization, knowledge exchange people who can advise you in the Usher Institute and more widely in the university. You can help you get those first introductions.
Yeah, and they can be uncomfortable conversations to have, but usually the uncomfortable ones are the ones that help you spark an idea. So yeah, unfortunately we can't meet face to face anymore, because that really helps as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's very hard to build a relationship from scratch without meeting people. But we've taken our offer from face to face to online. So we've been working with a lot of people we've never met recently. And I mean, in some ways it's good because you can work with anyone anywhere in the world. So you're no longer confined to people who are nearby. So it has its advantages as well.
Next question is from Michael. So you said the main motivation to leave, whether your research interest is not conventional research, and with bureaucracy in the university, I wonder how you find that certainty of success, or is that necessary?
We didn't know if it would work. Like, we really didn't know. We just thought, okay, we'll give it a shot. We'll give it a few years and see what happens. That was all. But I suppose what we knew was that we would get consultancy work, that we wouldn't be on the breadline. I mean, I'm the main earner in my family, so it was kind of more risky for me than Elsa, who's, you know, has someone else who also earns a reasonable amount of money. But you know, we were pretty sure we would get consultancy work at the worst, so we'd have a kind of fallback if the whole bigger idea didn't work out. Or we could get another job, or I suppose we felt we were employable enough that, you know, if it didn't work out, we would be able to do something else. So, and it's interesting, I'm reading a book at the moment which is about what makes great businesses, and one of the main things is just conviction and keeping going, and it's not about charisma at all. Actually, what the book shows is humble leaders are much better than charismatic ones, but it's just, okay, well, this is a problem, how are we going to solve it? Move on to the next thing. Or this is a problem, how are we going to solve it? Oh, we thought it would be like this, it isn't, let's go here, you know, and just being able to just keep taking the next step and sticking with what you believe is going to work out. I mean, a lot of companies start off on one track and then actually completely change, and they kind of pivot to something completely different. That's pretty common, because as they start to get out there and talk to people, as the previous questioner was saying, then they realize, oh, actually the problem that I thought could be solved with this can't, it needs to be solved with that. Or that's not really the most important problem, this one is, and I've got a better idea for that. So yeah, I think, I mean, so the kind of the brave part of leave is just being able to take the courage of your convictions. The other thing is I got some coaching, which the university, thank you, paid for. So I had some career coaching, and that definitely helped me to be brave enough to just take the jump, because I think, you know, if you're just sitting there thinking, oh yeah, well, I could do that, but actually it's just making it happen. And I think having that support of a coach, and actually we still both have coaching, me and my business partner, because we think it's really important to be able to keep going and, you know, have somewhere else to take issues if need be.
Leap of faith. I hear that a lot in health IT implementation as well. Yeah. So there's no certainties of success, but, you know, you can adapt to the circumstances, and you need to focus on the problem. So yeah, exactly what you're saying is true for that area as well. And then we had a few things, a few people being really interested in the partnership advice. So maybe we should start. Maybe there should be a matchmaking service. You know, we have a lot of complementary skills in the university, so we should maybe actively look for that. But how do you resolve creative differences within a partnership? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, well, I'm really lucky that Ailsa and I are both very straight up people, quite honest people who, you know, don't let problems fester. So, you know, I've been involved in really difficult situations in the university where nobody just wanted to grasp the nettle and sort it out. And neither of us are like that. We are real nettle graspers. So if we have a problem or a difference, we just work it out between us. And luckily, you know, we've had some quite difficult things to deal with, but we've never had a fundamental disagreement about anything. And what someone gave us some really good advice early on, which was to imagine all the posts you would have in your business when there's only two of you. So you'd have a head of finance, and you'd have a head of product, and you'd have a head of clients, or whatever, client services, whatever it is. So as these roles become clear, start writing them down. And then we started allocating them between us. So one of us would take a lead on one thing, and one of us would take a lead on another thing. And so we did that really early on, and we've carried on doing that even as we've got people into some of those posts. And that just means that one of you knows, okay, I'll try and figure out this, and the other one, you know, so you're not both all battling on the same things, trying to come up with different ways of sorting them out. You're just, one of you takes the lead and the other one plays a more supportive role. But we have never had a fundamental disagreement. I think if you did, the thing to do would be to get mediation in really quickly, because people do fall out setting up businesses. Quite often that's why they go under, actually, is because the people at the core can't agree. But, you know, there are ways of resolving differences, but you've got to really be honest. And sometimes you just got to take a deep breath. Like you said, Kathrin, having that uncomfortable conversation. Sometimes you've got to take a deep breath. There was one day I remember when I just messaged Ailsa and said, we just need to sit down and talk. And actually, we've been doing this whole bit of strategy, and I'd suddenly become really uncomfortable with it. And I just wanted to go back and revisit it. So we just did it. And I said, look, I'm not sure I can do this. So, you know, we just took it a few steps back and sat down and had that real, okay, well, what do we want? What do we really want? What do we want to be doing? And just keep. The other thing, there's some quite nice things about aligning your personal passions and the things you're good with with a business purpose and making sure they fit together. Because obviously if, you know, one of us suddenly decided, oh, we wanted to really have a knitting business and knitting was our passion, that's going to be a pretty fundamental problem. But as the way it works out, you know, Ailsa is an outcome expert and working with outcomes is her passion. And I'm much more kind of data use, evidence use person. So those are really complementary in terms of the business that we're running. And as long as we don't get jaded about those, we should be fine.
Excellent. And yeah, I suppose it's about ethics and values as well at the most basic level, isn't it? Especially with a mission focused company.
Yeah.
One quick more question. We're almost, I haven't asked all mine, so we have to speak again.
Okay.
But there was a lot of interest. So Carol asked, with hindsight, were there any structures you wish you had put in place as joint funders?
Do you know what? We had a really good piece of luck, which was that Ailsa was in a rowing club with a really, really good business lawyer who gave us all of our business advice in terms of how we set up the company. So we got this really high quality advice on structure. And so that has all been fine. There's nothing been fundamentally wrong with the way we set things up. And I still hold by, you know, I still think we made the right decision to be a company, not a charity or a social enterprise or something like that. So I don't think there's anything really fundamentally wrong. And then the other structures are still really evolving. So like our kind of staffing structures really evolving, and you know, things are still pretty fluid as we grow. We've now got a few more senior staff, so we're just in the process of trying to work out, you know, where the lines are between different teams that have a different focus. And again, we're trying to do that a bit differently because there's some really interesting stuff around using matrices rather than top-down hierarchies, because we're trying not to just replicate, you know, we don't necessarily want a very top-down company, and all of the best research about companies is, you know, you empower people to do a really good job and bring their best selves to work and all of those sorts of things. So trying to build structures that really support our values around all of that. So I'd say apart from the initial setup where we decided we were a business and these were the shares and all the rest of it, we haven't done anything that's kind of created a structure that's not been able to grow with us and work with us. I mean, obviously we set up some financial stuff, but that's all been fine as well. So no, there hasn't really, that stuff's been a lot easier than you would think, because you're building something quite small to start with. So, you know, it doesn't have to be perfectly formed. And then as you grow, it becomes a bit more robust, but it can kind of evolve with you.
Yeah, so agile and willing to change. Yeah. That was super interesting. Thank you so much. So if any of you want to hear more, there's another seminar you said today.
I'm doing a seminar on research impact later today. You have to register for it. If you go to our website, you'll find it. And then we're running this research impact school, which we ran last autumn, which is to kind of take, if you're more interested in the kind of research impact assessment stuff. And then Ailsa's doing a webinar about outcomes and working meaningfully with outcomes in February. So
brilliant.
They're all on our website at matterofocus.com.
Thank you very much. Really interesting, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.